Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Cartoon Soup podcast. Sorry about the bad audio we had in our past episodes. It's fixed now, and let's just get over it and move on. Today, we're talking about things we love and hate in media. We're going to start with talking about the things we hate. This isn't a comprehensive list overall because there is a lot of stuff we did not mention that is pretty obvious, and I feel like we shouldn't have to mention. So, we're going to go into more specific stuff. So, let's just get started. Do you want me to go first or you?
You can go first.
Okay. Okay, I have to be really specific about this one because overall I do like the idea, but it's this one specific case that I do not like. And that's characters who have pre-established relationships, but do not remember that they have pre-established relationships and it's used to be seen as romantic. Hell of a Boss. Season 2, Episode 1. Basically, in Season 2, Episode 1, we find out that Blitz and Solus knew each other when they were children, and they, basically the way they reconnect as they become adults, but Blitz doesn't remember that Solus and Blitz knew each other as they were children, only Solus does, I think. Honestly, it's been a while since I watched that. I don't want to rewatch it, so I don't remember. But basically, I feel like you're telling me, in a world that's as big as it is, these two people knew each other when they were little, separated, forgot about each other, meet each other again, and don't recognize each other, and completely forget about each other. And somehow that's supposed to be seen as proof for us that these two characters should become romantically involved. For some reason, this is your proof that they are the OTP. I just can't buy it.
But Marco, you forget people love the childhood friends to lovers trope.
Here's the thing, I can go for the childhood friends to lovers trope. I just can't when there's no connection there. Knowing each other as children isn't proof that you two should become a couple. Do I really have to explain this? I feel like it's obvious. And you know what's weird? I've seen this in multiple pieces of media. I've seen this in 4 pieces of media that I can remember. So Hell of a Boss. I recently was watching this anime called Cells at Work, and in that we find out red blood cell and white blood cell knew each other in the bone marrow. It just was unnecessary because I really enjoyed that anime, but I really am enjoying that anime. I'm still watching it. But it just felt like an unnecessary episode because it doesn't change anything about the story. I feel like the story stayed exactly the same. 2 more anime, Fruits Basket, a popular shoujo anime. I don't like Fruits Basket, I'm not gonna go into it, but spoilers for Fruits Basket. Basically, we learned that the ginger guy knew the main character's mom, and then we also find out that the silver-haired guy gave the main character a hat when they were both little, and yet despite that, only the ginger-haired guy remembers meeting the main character. And it's supposed to, I don't know, just the way it was used to show romantic tension, and the way it was used to create drama just annoyed me, and I could not love it. And the last one was Romantic Killer, but I'm not going to go into that one because I'm really just repeating myself at this point.
Do you think that in the case of Hell of a Boss, it was just the writer wanted to retcon something? They wanted to retcon it a little bit and be like, no, yeah, they actually knew each other when they were kids. So, by the way, guys.
Oh, because from what I remember, I feel like the first season was very planned out. But the second season felt less planned out and less executed as well. And I feel like there definitely wasn't probably enough time spent plotting out the plot. So I could honestly see someone being like, oh, I need to find a way to convince everyone that these two characters should be together, and just coming up with that. I wouldn't be surprised, but I just wish this wouldn't become a trope because honestly it annoys me, and I can never be convinced that 2 characters should be together because they knew each other since they were children. Sure, you knew each other since you were children, but what if that child is an asshole? Okay, unconditional love. I don't believe in it because what if the person you love becomes an asshole? What if they become abusive? You can't love them anymore. My love will always be conditional, and you know what? Maybe I'm an asshole for that, but at least I'm being honest. Okay, let's talk about miscommunication. I don't hate miscommunication totally. I only hate it when it's used to create more drama. So I guess a good example for this would be my favorite manga of all time, Bloom Into You, because despite how much I love it, I can't help but see the flaws in it as I get older. And a big flaw I have with the story, even though let me get this clear, I love Bloom Into You. A big flaw I can't help but see in the story is the fact that there's miscommunication used in the last 2 volumes. Yes, I guess in a part it's used to create drama, but it's mostly used in order to show the flaws in these 2 characters' relationships from the start, and how flawed this relationship was in the start, and how they need to fix it in order to become an actual couple. However, despite that, I still couldn't help but feel annoyed. And honestly, I can excuse miscommunication as long as there's a point to it other than drama. But I feel like most writers only use it for drama, and I can't stand that. And Mal, I'm pretty sure you hate miscommunication too.
Yes, but okay, I wrote something like a little bit different from that. Well, I guess it sort of is similar. Generally, I don't like it because I feel like it implies emotional immaturity in the characters. And personally, I'm not a fan of that. Obviously, it would work in like school characters like Bloom and Two because, they're not completely emotionally mature. I think I'm more lenient with this when it happens in a non-modern setting. Like in contemporary stories, when we're dealing with adults, what do you mean that these bitches can't just sit down and talk? Like, what do you mean one of the characters would rather simmer and seethe in their own misunderstanding than just talk to the other character? Like, that's what I have an issue with in modern settings, is there's usually not a situation where they're in an extraneous situation that's preventing them from, like, having an actual, like, sit down and talk. They're not in a world where there's this intergalactic war going on or other shit that's just happening, and, like, they simply can't sit down and talk, but rather it's usually a situation where like person A walks in on person B hugging person C, and then person A is immediately like, person B hates me, they'll never love me, and I'm worthless. The only solution to this is to ignore them and start flirting with this other person to make them jealous, and then all my problems will be solved.
Also think a real big problem is how you characterize your characters, because if like a certain characterization of your main character is that they're immature and they have to work through their immaturity, like I feel like you could kind of write miscommunication and have it be like make sense for the character. However, when it's like every single character, there's a problem. Like at that point, you need to fix your characters, because you can have all your characters be the same and have the same exact flaws. And I feel like in some adult romances, it's all the characters who are immature and miscommunicate. But if that's not the point, then what are you doing? You know? Okay, my next one is a big one. Romances destined to fail, especially queer ones. Okay, I've experienced a few pieces of media where the whole story is about how the relationship we're learning about was never going to work in the first place. And while I do like the idea, I personally cannot deal with it. I personally cannot help but get angry at the character for making things not work out. My best example of this would be a book called Memorial by Brian Washington. Memorial is about two gay guys who were in a relationship, and it's about them figuring out they need to break up by the end of the book. Yeah, it's basically about them moving on from the relationship. And while I do like the idea, I personally just cannot get past finding characters frustrating. Like I understand that like frustrating characters are going to happen, but when it comes to a romance, when it comes to something that's trying to be a romance or that deals with romantic relationships, I don't want to read about that personally. And I feel like we don't get enough queer media as it is. So why would I waste my time reading about a queer romance that's not going to work out? You know? Yeah, they just frustrate me. I just can't deal with it personally. But I do understand why people like this, I guess. Unless, okay, here's my thing. I understand why people like this until it becomes character deaths in gay romances. Like if it's about not working out, but it's not a character death, I can understand why people like it to a certain extent.
I always thought stuff like this was just like a thing for the straights. I think it comes from the fact that it's like, why would you want to write something like this when there's already so much media out there about gays losing?
Exactly. Exactly. I just feel like with the way our world is right now, or with the way our world has always been, why would you want to read about that or write about that currently? Like I understand that these stories are important, but personally, I don't get it.
And there's stories that have been told for so long
Yeah, yeah.
of like us losing. We are always losing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I just don't get it. Okay, speaking of romances, another thing that I do not like in general is romance in general. There is an exception to this, and I know this is gonna sound really lame. I do enjoy romance if it's in a manga or anime format. If it's in a novel format, I can't deal with it because I have to read the character's thoughts and everything. And a lot of the times, these characters are annoying. Like I can't live for your romances, you guys. I honestly don't believe most characters should be together. But if it's in a manga or anime format, I will eat that shit up. And I think it's probably because there's actual art to it and not just dialogue and monologues. I know you're judging me, but that's just the way I am.
You do sound a little cringy when you say that.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
But so then what about, you say just manga and anime, but what about like shows and movies and comics?
Comics also. But movies and shows, here's the thing, I haven't watched enough queer ones. So a lot of the movies and shows that are romances I've watched are straight ones. And
Ugh.
uh And I personally have not been shown that romances in that genre are good so far, or in that category are good so far. But that's probably just because I haven't been looking for good ones. And also because there's not enough gay romance out there, like I've mentioned before. Okay, next one. Mal, you're going to agree with me on this. Talking animals, but for me also animal point of views. A good example of this is Dead End Paranormal Park and the She-Ra 2018 reboot. Swiftwind and Pugsley are the most annoying characters out there, and I cannot deal with them. I think for me, it just has to do with the fact that, okay, here's the thing. I feel like writers try to make animal point of views too animalistic when you're never going to know what an animal is actually thinking because they can't speak, right? So whenever we get a Pugsley point of view, it's always about what he's sniffing. Like he has this thing where he sniffs a person's butt and he knows what that person ate like a few hours ago. And I'm like, why would that need to be there? I feel like you're just trying to make it seem like you're trying to make it make sense as an animal point of view, but I feel like it will never make sense because you truly do not know what an animal is thinking. Well, a conscious animal because we're animals too. I just find them annoying. I just find them not fun. And honestly, today I read a manga that had an animal point of view called A Man and His Cat. Why were there cat puns every 5 seconds? I could not deal with it. Like, it was like meowtastic or mutastic. And I was like, what is going on here? Like, I can't deal with it. Like, it gives me the mindset of those Instagram accounts run by people who like write from their animal's point of view. And it just never is executed well. And I feel like if you're gonna make an animal point of view, you really need to think deeply, like, how do I make this character make sense?
I also like I swear, like at least 90% of talking pets are voiced by men who use the most annoying voice and cadence they could think of. And talking pets are especially annoying if they're not like a main character, because then actually what is the point of that character? Like I do hate Pugsley from Dead End Paranormal Park, but at least him having the ability to talk was like a really integral part to the story. But like, why the fuck did Swiftwind have more lines than Kyle? Like, how does that work? And I think what irritates me is also in Shira we get Milog, which doesn't talk. Right? It like bonded with Katra, and like Katra's the only one who can understand it, and she's the one that sort of like talks for it. I think that, first of all, is a great example of how to deal with, like, quote unquote talking pets. But also, I really feel like the writers saw how much people hated Swiftwind and were like, so we can't have Milog talk.
Here's the thing. If they just made Milog a normal person but in an animal form, I feel like people wouldn't have been annoyed as they were like with Swiftwind, you know? Because I feel like with Swiftwind, they made him like too animalistic in a sense, and they made him like too annoying.
When I feel like when people say, okay, I feel like there is a vibe that is assigned to certain animals. Like a great example of that is when people think of a dog, they're like, oh, soft, oh, fluffy, oh, cute, oh, like, oh, they're just a small bean, or like, oh, they're so cute. And then when a cat, when they think of a cat, they're like, oh, they're like mean and cold hearted and stuff or whatever. That really shows whenever the animals are given human personalities, where the dog will usually be like this lovable dumb guy and the
Yeah.
cat will be like this kind of like sensual sexy woman.
Yeah, and you also mentioned something about like making having to make sense for the plot, like the character having to have a purpose in the plot. And for Swiftwind, there was an example of like apparently she was supposed to connect with him in order to find something. I forgot, but I feel like that being his only purpose was not good enough to like have him in there. You know?
Yeah. And also,
Yeah.
even then, instead of making him an annoying character, if you took away his ability to speak, then I feel like it would actually make them finding their connection even more impactful, because then it's like Shira has to focus more on what she's feeling and like her like this actual like physical connection that they have, instead of him being like, we have to connect, Shira. We have to be best friends, Shira. Like they have to feel it instead. Show, what is it? Show don't tell.
Show don't tell. Yeah.
Yes.
Um. What else? Okay. Amnesia. I feel like this is overdone. I don't have a good. Actually, I do. The Legend series by Marie Lu. This is a really old dystopian YA series I read when I was in middle school. Spoilers: the third book ends with one of the main characters getting amnesia and basically be like, "Oh, they meet again, even though he has amnesia or she has amnesia." I'm not sure which one has amnesia, and it's supposed to be seen as romantic. I feel like if you're going to do amnesia, You have to actually have it make sense in the real world. Like I feel like the way people use amnesia is just like in a really unrealistic route. And I get that unrealism has to happen because they're stories, but there has to be a certain extent to where your story is grounded. And I feel like all of these amnesias that I've seen in stories are never actually grounded and make sense with what happens in the real world with amnesia. Also, it's just really annoying to have like all this character growth and then having them forget everything that they've gone through. It's just so repetitive to be like, oh my god, we lost a lot of character development. Now we have to go through all that character development again. And I feel like it's also way too convenient because like they'll forget everything, and then suddenly at the perfect moment, at the right time, when like everyone is about to die, they remember how to do whatever they needed to do. They remember like the secret lock or passcode or whatever, you know?
Or if it's in, like, a romantic setting, then they'll, like, remember everybody and everything except for their partner. Like, they'll completely forget their partner and their entire relationship with their partner, and then, like, their partner's heartbroken, and they're like, "Oh, no, what do I" like, situations like that as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's just so overdone and so annoying, and I don't want to see it anymore. I feel like if you're gonna do amnesia, do it in a sort of realistic route at least. Next one, questionable age gaps. Do I really need to explain this? How do I explain this? If you are both over 30, I don't mind as much. But there's something wrong with like predators dating barely illegal people. I'm sorry. Like I can't do it. I can't do it. I feel like how I don't even have words because like I don't even know how to explain this because it sounds so obvious to me. But like it feels very predatory. It feels like there's a power dynamic.
I feel like if you can legally run for president, you shouldn't be dating somebody who can't even legally rent a car, you know?
Yes. Like your brains are at different levels at that point. Maturity levels. Like you're way more mature. What would you even talk about? Like I just don't want to see that in my media, and I don't think I have in a long time, to be honest. So that's good. Medieval European fantasy. I feel like I've seen this too much, and I need something new. Like if you're gonna do a fantasy, why does it always have to be European and medieval times? I want something fresh. Like give me a different time period.
You know why they said it during that time.
And you know which authors are specifically writing that time period.
Ooh,
But you didn't hear that from me.
technically, we didn't say anything.
Technically, we only implied stuff.
Technically, we
I
only made possible suggestions.
yeah, but I'm just really tired of that. I want diversity, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. I love to be the woke friend. I want more diversity in these stories, and I'm tired of seeing the same setting. I want a different location. I also just feel like the majority of these authors who write medieval fantasy are male sexist authors who write rape scenes in their books and excuse it because like, oh, it makes sense in the times. And I'm just like, you just want to write a rape scene. Let's just be honest. If you want to talk about like sexism, you would have done it better. You wouldn't have just had a rape scene just to have a rape scene.
And also, like, gratuitous violence towards women, and also just, like, to have just, like, a blatant exclusion of people of color.
Yes. Yes. I just feel like you guys need to stop making excuses for these authors because these authors know what they're doing. Like they're doing this on purpose. They're not trying to like write about sexism. They're just writing a sexist story. And I feel like I need a lot of you to realize that. We're not so different, you and I. I honestly hate this trope. A good example of this doing it of being done somewhat okay was Batman the Killing Joke. I feel like well actually I don't know if I would say that because at the same time okay, here's the thing. In Batman the Killing Joke, basically we find out that Joker, like the reason he became the Joker was because he had one bad day. And basically he tells Batman that we're not so different. That you had one bad day and that turned you into who you are today. However, they turn into two completely different people, and I feel like trying to compare the two doesn't make sense. And even Batman is like, you can't compare us because you let that turn you into a terrible person. I let that turn me into a good person. So we're not actually the same at all, if that makes sense. And I feel like a lot of the times this is used in media to basically be like, oh, we're the same because we're a superhero and I'm a supervillain. Oh, isn't that crazy? Like they're not the same at all, right? Because if they were the same, they would have gone down a similar path. And I feel like in a lot of media, it's used to be like, oh, this is why you should turn evil, but like it doesn't make sense.
A great way to figure out if, like, the writer actually wanted to create a story where it's like these people are actually the same versus somebody who just, like, kinda wanted to be edgy
Yeah.
is whether they actually say or, like, whether the villain actually says, like, to the good guy, like, "We're actually the same person." It's the same thing with, like, show don't tell. If you're watching a story where it's never explicitly said, But, you know, if you're an attentive, like, watcher or reader, you can tell that there are obvious parallels between these 2 people, like, one who is on, you know, the bad side and one who's on the good side. You yourself can look at that and be like, "Well, actually, they had a pretty, like, similar situations happen to them, and they diverged very, like, aggressively, yet they still have these parallels to each other. They're actually very similar." That is usually a story that has taken that idea and has actually written it well.
I feel like I'm not sure if this is the best example, but it's the closest one I could think of off the top of my head. I think She-Ra season 4, Glimmer and Catra, they're not being like we're the same as we're both terrible people. They're like we're the same as in we're both assholes. Because both Glimmer and Catra go down a terrible mental state where they push their friends away and they're basically left both alone without their friends, and it's kind of both their faults. And it's about both of them like growing from that point.
Another controversial example of this is Jinx and Caitlyn from Arcane. I don't want to get into it because this might be I don't want to like cause any drama, but personally, both of them are very similar.
Watched it, so I can't say anything about that, but speak on the controversy if you want to.
I can't. The haters are too strong.
Okay. Moving on. Next one, power of friendship. I just feel like it's been there, done that. I feel like it's old, it's corny, it's cheesy. If it's like a piece of kids media, I get it. But sometimes they're like more teen stories that do this, and I'm just like it's too cheesy. Like it's too much. I can't have everything solved with friendship. And I think a good example of this would be the Blue Beetle graduation day comic we read, because Jaime literally gained superpowers after like realizing that he has friends.
No, yeah, it depends on how you package it and how you execute it because I feel like there's a difference between well, actually, maybe this is like a completely different thing, but it's like you know when like those like dystopian movie or like stories wherever where it's like the people at the bottom finally rise up and they're like we're stronger together.
Hmm.
I feel like there are similarities between that and the power of friendship trope where I feel like they are like very similar in what they're in like the message they're trying to put out, but I feel like the way they're executed are very different, which makes one usually more palatable than the other.
I definitely feel like it has to do with the execution. Again, show don't tell, because like if you're saying, "Oh, I'm doing this for my friends," like I'm going to fight, I'm going to get stronger because of my friends. Like I'm doing this because friends, because I'm getting stronger because friends. I feel like it at that point, like that's just bad writing. But if you're like showing it very subtly that like these characters are getting stronger because of their connection, I feel like that can actually be pretty decent. Um, Mind control. I've talked about this before. I'm going to talk about Shira again because I feel like even though Shira isn't, I would say, an amazing example of this, I feel like it's a pretty decent one of like how to do it right. In the Shira 2018 reboot, Catra has been mind controlled, and basically Adora, I think is her name, has to fight her. I hate it when the person being mind controlled is convinced like snap out of it. I want a story where the person being mind controlled doesn't snap out of their mind control, they just get defeated. Because I feel like I've seen it way too much where like someone snaps out of it through the power of friendship, which I also hate, and it's just not something I enjoy. But in Shira, there is, I think there, I'm not sure, I think there is a scene where Catcher like snaps out of it for a little bit, but she doesn't completely snap out of it.
Well, the thing that may differentiate the Shira story versus others, because I really don't have any other experience with other like mind control stories, but
Hmm.
the one in Shira is that there's literally a chip on like connected to them that is forcing them to do this, and the only time Catra quote unquote snaps out of it is when the chip is affected. So it's not her snapping out of it; it's the chip that's controlling her being damaged.
Yeah, and I specifically remember she only like truly snaps out at once she's defeated, and I think that's doing it well because I'm tired of like I'm a like the power of friendship like I mentioned before, and in fact the only times someone snaps out of it is through the power of friendship, and I just don't like that. I also feel like it's fully cheap and repetitive. Most times it's done. A bad example of this, Batman Bad Blood. um, this was also power friendship-y. It was more like realize who you truly are. But I will say, is I feel like it mostly has to do with the dialogue. The dialogue felt corny, it felt bad, it just was not good, and I feel like personally the dialogue needed to be better. I feel like if you execute the dialogue well in a mind control scenario, the mind control scenario will usually be better depending on how good the dialogue is. But in Batman Bad Blood, the dialogue was not good. And I don't think the mind control scene was good either. Love triangles. I don't hate the idea. I just feel like I need it to be either queer, quote unquote, love triangle. I need it to be an actual love triangle because I can't deal with be like, oh, these two boys love me, but I don't know which one to choose. And you know, I hate how these two boys will both lower their standards and be like, "Oh, I'm okay with being second place. I'm okay as long as you end up choosing me in that." Like, no, what are you talking about? Like, I need you to raise your standards. I need you to realize this person does not truly love you if they're only making you your second choice. And it frustrates me and it makes me annoyed, which is why I can only see it if it's a queer love triangle or if it's an actual love triangle where every character likes every character. Those are the only two exceptions where I truly enjoy it. But overall, no, hell no. Long running rom coms. I don't like this shit. This shit is like bad. So my best example of this would be New Girl. I just feel like the fact that they're long running is what makes them not good because I feel like most shows do not need to be this long. Also, I just feel like comedy is subjective, and in most rom coms I've seen, the comedy is not good. And that's all I'll say on that. Okay, next one. I feel like I've already talked about this, but I need to say it again just to make it clear for the girlies out there. Romantic relationships between someone who is immortal and not mortal, especially if they're like older. So here's my one exception. If the mortal character is like 50 years old and the mortal character is also 50 years old, I can kind of excuse it. Because like if they're the same age, then I'm okay with it. But if like one's like 100 years old or like 1,000 years old and the other one's like 30, that's weird. I'm sorry. There's like a different maturity level and everything. Like I don't understand it. Pop culture references. Um, why do you have to mention Star Wars in your story? Why do you have to mention why do you have to mention like Harry Potter in your story? Like it dates your story. And I feel like a lot of the times these pop culture references will not last because people will grow older and forget about these pop culture references.
I think the only time a pop culture reference is tasteful is if it is literally an object in the background. Like if it's like a Star Wars parody poster or like a some sort of like He-Man action figure, sure. But if you're a character and you just say some bullshit like "Great Scott" or some shit like that, what are you doing? You know? I feel like when you reference media that it dates you, but if you have a reference to it that's not like a main focal point, then you can get away with it.
And I would also say to that, including pop culture references, I don't like it when social media is mentioned in media because I'm pretty sure there are books out there that mention MySpace. I'm pretty sure there are books that mention other social media platforms that are no longer a thing. I just feel like it dates the book. I just feel like it no longer makes the book timeless. And if you're writing a book, I feel like it should be timeless. So yeah, I personally don't like it. Second chance romance. I feel like if two characters broke up, they broke up for a reason. A lot of the times that reason is cheating. A lot of the times that reason is being an asshole. A lot of the times you broke up for a reason and that reason is good. And that's why you shouldn't get together. Honestly, I don't believe that like if two people break up, they should get back together because a lot of the times the reason you broke up is really bad. And I just can't root for someone who like acted terrible in that relationship. Like I'm sure you've grown and changed, but like have you? Have you really? And a lot of the times it's a no, and no, you haven't changed. So yeah, I personally can't stand second chance romances. The only book that has the second chance romance that I've enjoyed is a Mako older book. I'll put the cover on the YouTube version of the podcast. I forgot what's called, but it's basically the sci-fi book. I really enjoyed it. I just personally feel like most of the times I need to be shown true growth from a character for me to be able to root for them again to be together. But most of the times I feel like it isn't really shown. Cheating. I don't have to explain this, but I don't like cheating.
What?
And the
What
last
do
thing I
you
don't.
mean? What do
What?
you mean you hate cheating? What? What's controversial about that?
I don't know. I don't know what's controversial about that. I just feel like exactly. I just feel like exactly.
In the beginning, we were like, well, obviously there are things that we don't like that we won't mention in here. I feel like cheating is a given. Are there people
And so
who are like chill with like cheating in media?
I don't. Here's the thing. I don't think there are because like dark romance girlies will like no, I won't read a book about cheating, but I'll read a book about abuse. So I don't think people. I think people all people hate cheating.
That's crazy. Let's not talk about the dark romance girlies because they also scare me.
Okay, okay. Yeah. And my last one is the fake girl. Basically girls that are like secretly fake. I feel like I've only seen this executed two ways. One is that I'm not like other girls scenario where the main character is judging the fake girl. Or the other one is we learn about the fake girl and learn why she acts this way. And I feel like both scenarios have both been done before, and it's just personally not something I want to read about or see again. Yeah, it's just something that I'm like, been there, done that. I understand why people like it if it's about like the fake girl and why she is that way. If it's like I'm not like other girls' way, I'm judging. But if it's like a why is she fake? I kind of get it because like exploring sexism basically. Um, but yeah, that's why I don't like. Shall we separate these into two episodes because I feel like it's gonna be pretty long.
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
What's wrong with long episodes, Marco? People
You're
love
so
long
right.
episodes.
You're so right. Forget I said anything.
Okay, so you brought up love triangles. Now, here's okay, how do okay, I'm gonna sound obsessive for no reason. I haven't when it comes to love triangle, okay, I have an issue with the word triangle because in my brain when you're using the word triangle in reference to a romantic entanglement between three people, it feels like there is an obvious implication that it is a situation where person A is attracted to person B, who's attracted to person C, who's attracted to person A. Because what does that make? A triangle. If there is no relationship going on between person B and C, then there is no line between them. Therefore, there is no triangle. You cannot convince me that a better way to describe the common definition of a love triangle would not be love pyramid, right? Think of whenever somebody is explaining a pyramid scheme to you, right? You have one person at the top and then two people at the bottom. Okay, when you have two people who are attracted to one person, that is a love pyramid. I just like this is just me ranting. It has never made sense to me why we are incorrect in using these words when there are better ways to describe them. Okay, rant over. Um so another thing I don't like is the idea that minorities and marginalized communities can't be villains. I believe that they can and should be villains. What I'm against is lazy writing, which is what we usually get when people do write villains that are minorities. The biggest issue usually lies within the villain's motives and origin story. For example, if a villain has a disability and that's their motive for being evil, like they want to hurt people because they were hurt, and they express this anger that they have for becoming disabled, then you're shitting on disabled people. You're saying you're actively saying that this person's life is worse because they have a disability.
Also, when the only diverse cast member is the villain, what
Oh
are you
yeah.
saying? What are you saying? Like,
Yes.
just be honest, you know?
Yes, yes. And then another example is let's say there's a bad guy who's also gay. What will happen is the way that they portray that this guy is bad and the way that they get you to believe that you shouldn't like him is they will rely on stereotypes. So they'll make the gay guy flirt or like throw unwanted sexual advances towards a straight man. And then now you are uncomfortable because you're reading this and you're like, well, that's gross. But the writer is relying on harmful stereotypes in order to make you hate this bad person when there are so many other ways that they can show you that you shouldn't be rooting for this character. Okay, another thing I hate is writers who include diverse characters just for the sake of diversity. What I mean by this is white writers shouldn't include diversity in their stories if they're not going to do it right, and if they're not going to put the work into it to do their research and to talk to people who know their shit. If they're not going to hire multiple sensitivity writers, they just shouldn't do it. I would rather, this is me personally, maybe it's a controversial opinion, I would rather have no representation than bad representation personally. I would rather there be no black people in a book than have the only black person be the white protag's sassy yet supportive black bestie who had a rough childhood but maintained her heart of gold and uses improper AAVE because the writer's only research came from TikTok. We don't need white writers to write more diverse characters. We need more diverse writers. And even then, it feels like a losing game because every other week, a POC writer is exposed for actually being a white person. So I guess we can never win.
Oh my god! Oh my god! I forgot about those controversies where like white writers are pretending to be people of color. Why'd you have to remind me? Oh my god!
What's crazy is there are so many more that we don't know about.
That you know what? That is crazy, and I hope none of the authors I've read are those people.
A scary thought. More likely than you think, though. Okay, the last issue I have is CGI replacing practical effects. It infuriates me when specifically big budget films use CGI for almost every scene that has action violence or just like beautiful scenery. Because what happened to stunt doubles? What happened to effect artists? But more importantly, why are we allowing this slop? Not only do these movies use CGI because they don't want to spend money on hiring people to do cool stuff, but the CGI doesn't even look good. But y'all watch that shit anyway, I guess. Okay, that's it. On to things we love, Marco?
Yes. Also, you guys, I forgot to mention this at the beginning of the episode, but we will also put every piece of media that we mentioned in the description, so that way if you hear something that you like, I like that trope and I want to read more media about it. Well, there you go. It's in the description. Literary horror is something I really enjoy, and basically, I guess another example of this would be like children's horror, where like it is technically horror, but it only goes to a certain extent, and the focus isn't about the horror, it's more about the characters or the story or the message. I personally can only stand horror if it's like focused more on the characters or the story or the message or whatever. I personally don't like horror for horror's sake. A good example of this would be Bunny by Mona Awad. This is horror, however, it feels like it's more of a critique of dark academia and more dealing with the character's loneliness than actual horror. Like there's still freaky stuff happening and all that, but I personally love the characterization, I personally love the character growth and the characters and what it's trying to say about college settings. Another good example of this, while this isn't technically literary horror, it's a graphic novel called Where Black Stars Rise. I mentioned this in our best and worst media of 2024. This is a piece of media about a therapist going through a mental breakdown. I personally really loved what this creator did with this character and what it said about like helping other people with mental health. I personally really enjoyed it, and I think I wouldn't have enjoyed this if I was just trying to be horror for horror's sake. I feel like what I enjoyed was the ending, was where the character ended up, and how the character basically reacted to having this mental breakdown. It was a really interesting graphic novel, and I feel like I said before, I can only like horror if it's not for horror's sake, which I know isn't something a lot of people agree about, but that's how I feel. An obvious one. Actually, do I have to say this because it's obvious? Queer media. I might as well say it. Yeah, that's all I have to say on that. And Mal agrees with me on that.
What I love about queer media is we're getting more of it. I think the best representation of this is just how far writers are able to go with queer relationships in their work nowadays. Why did I write this? We went from Korra and Asami holding hands in the season finale of Legend of Korra to, no spoilers, season 2, episode 8 of Arcane. I'm not gonna give any spoilers, but if you know, you know. So many queer relationships went through years of slow burn because the writers either weren't allowed to or didn't think they could explicitly show that relationship. Like, how long did it take for Marceline and Bubblegum to smooch on television? I'm
Literally
just
10 seasons.
yes, yes,
And 10 long seasons.
yes. I'm glad that I'm living in this era. I do fear that this may be the peak, though. I do believe that maybe we will be facing censorship in the future. But for now, what we have been given up until this point has been amazing.
Yes. The next thing I really love is magical. Well, first of all, magical realism and speculative fiction in general. But what I specifically love about these genres is magical realism or speculative fiction that has to do with things going missing in the world or basically the world glitching, like real life glitches. So I have a good amount of examples for this. The first one being, I hate to talk about it again, Shira. Mel actually mentions that in Shira season 3, I think. Ojora basically goes to this like memory wiping thing where like she's back at the Horde and like things are going wrong, like the world is basically glitching out and she has to find a way to like save the world again. And I really love like that type of story where like basically something's going wrong in the world and basically the world is glitching out. Another good example of this would be The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. This is a novel about basically every few days or months, I think, something in the world goes missing, and basically everyone forgets that this thing exists in the world. And it's about this main character who wants to become an author when suddenly novels go missing, and she can't remember how to write a novel anymore. It's a really interesting book. I've really enjoyed it, and I just really love the idea of like the world glitching out and things happening because the world is glitching out. I just feel like there's so much you can do with that type of story, and the stories I've read about so far that do have that type of thing in their stories are really amazing. Wholesome romance where nothing goes wrong, really. I personally, in the world I live in currently, I'm personally a wholesome girly. And you know what? That's just me. I love cozy fantasy. I love cozy mysteries. And you know what? I do. You know, that's so funny because I used to love like intense books a lot when I was younger, and I still do love like intense, hard hitting books. But recently, I've been leaning towards more cozy stuff. I guess I love both in a sense. Okay, I'm not human anymore. I feel like this is something that I really enjoyed, though I haven't seen it a lot. Basically, the character relates is that because maybe they have superpowers or something, they're no longer human. I feel like there's a specific thing I want to be seen in a piece of media about specifically dealing with the I'm not human anymore plotline that I have not seen. Usually in I'm not human anymore plotlines, the main characters like goes through like a really sad point in their stage of life because they realize they're not human anymore. And they're like really sad about it, really upset about it, like mentally unwell. I want to see a character who realizes they're not human anymore and like digs deep into that side of themselves. Like basically like let me be a monster, basically. I personally haven't seen a character who's like, yeah, I'm a monster, let me be one. I want to see a fucked up character. And I personally really wish I could watch a piece of media like that's like that.
I would argue to a smaller scale, that's Catra.
I would too. I just personally want to see the I'm not human anymore route.
Yeah,
Um,
she is saved by lesbianism, but for most of the show, Catra is that.
yes. Yes. Revenge plot lines. I really love revenge plot lines. I feel like there's so much you can do with this. My best example would be a really long book and a classic book that I read a long time ago, The Count of Monte Cristo. I feel like this book does a revenge plotline well, where we follow the main character who is betrayed by people, goes through wanting to get revenge, and then has a realization about revenge. I feel like there are two routes you can go with this story. Either the character digs deeper into revenge, or they realize that revenge is bad. I feel like I like both routes. I just want to see more of it. I really love robots. Again, I feel like with robots, there are two plot lines you can really have, where the robot becomes like a human, or the robot like is an unfeeling robot. Um, I enjoy both plot lines. Again, I just want to see more of it. Animals without animal POVs. I hate animal point of views, like I mentioned before, but I genuinely do enjoy animals if there isn't an animal point of view. I just really hope to see more of it. Like, I'm tired of animal point of views. Just give me straight up animals, you guys. Stories about the afterlife. I feel like this is a weird one. I've seen this in a few books and only in a few books. My best example would be More Than This by Patrick Ness. This is a young adult novel I read when I was a teenager, so I'm not sure if it's any good anymore. But basically, we follow our main character after he dies, waking up and realizing that he's in a new world. We don't know if he's truly died, we don't know what's happening to him, but it's about him exploring this new world and figuring out what's going on after dying. I feel like there's so much you can do with stories about afterlife or stories about the character has died and now they're in a new world. And I'm not talking about isekai. I am not talking about isekai. I want to make that clear because because that's I just realized that sounded a lot like isekai. I feel like most stories can be executed well with this plotline, and I've really enjoyed those types of stories. Fate's Worse Than Death. This is also very similar to I'm No Longer Human. I feel like a good example of this would be Homer from Madoka Magica, the movie. Yeah, I just really love seeing what a character is thinking if they're going to decide to have a fate worse than death. And like I feel like there's so much characterization you could do with that type of plot line, and I've really enjoyed the characterization I've seen done with this type of plot line done so far. Mel, I know you don't like this, but I personally really enjoyed time travel and time loops. I like it when it's done well. Let me make this clear. I like it when it's done well, and I feel like both stories do it poorly. But the ones I've seen done well, I personally really enjoyed.
I mean, I would have to agree with you then also because I do like it when it's done well, and by that, I mean I only like it in Inuyasha.
Okay, but yeah, I feel like I personally have just seen it done well a few times, and I really enjoy it every single time. This one's a simple one. Downtime. Time when we're not focusing on the main story and we're just seeing the characters relax after a battle or after a really important plot point. I feel like this is necessary in stories, because if you don't see the characters actually like having downtime, then you can't really see what they are in their day-to-day lives, and it's harder to like characterize them. I feel like my best example of this would be Avatar: The Last Airbender. There are big battles, but there are also times when they're just relaxing, and I really enjoy that. Found family. I have a love-hate relationship with found family because I feel like at the same time it can go the power of friendship route, and I hate it when it goes the power of friendship route. But I do like some examples of it. My best example would be Nothing to See Here by Calvin Wilson. This story is about a bunch of kids who can combust randomly, like into fire, and it's about this nanny basically realizing that the family that has them isn't treating them well, and basically she takes them in and runs away with them. And I personally really love that story. I feel like it can be done well. I just feel like it depends. Again, should not tell. If you're like saying, "Oh, power of friendship," "Oh, we're found family," I feel like it's corny. Really, just depends on how you do it. Okay, Mal was confused by this one, so I'm gonna say it differently. Capitalistic alien organizations. Basically, aliens have to deal with capitalism too. This is just a fun one. I feel like what has been done with this one is pretty stereotypical, but despite the fact that's very seen that been done there, I still really enjoy it every time. And the last one I have is major character deaths. I want to see more characters die. It makes me sad, but at the same time, it's very impactful and it hits hard every time. As long as it's done well, again, I don't want to see these characters survive. I want to see them dead for real, even though it does hurt. Like I personally love it a lot, and that's it.
Okay. So I love lesbian or sapphic relationships with opposing aesthetics. Okay. At least in animation, I do think it is the law that that like you have to have this. Like I don't think you can write a story about girl kissers unless they have two completely different aesthetics and personalities. Yes, Mike. Yes, Marco.
You called me your brother's name again.
I did. Stop. Stop. Don't bring it up. I corrected myself.
Adventure Time. That's all I had to say.
Oh, that's the only example you have? Okay, where do I start? Korosami, Garnet, Coral Ivy, whatever Sailor Uranus and Neptune's ship name is, Catradora, Bumblebee, Lumity, Hatevi, etc., etc., etc. There's probably a bunch more, not a bunch more because, you know, we don't get that much representation, but I feel like every single example I've seen, they always have opposing aesthetics, and I absolutely love it. And it's opposing aesthetics that complement each other.
I was thinking about how you called me Michael. Sorry.
Stop thinking about it. Stop. Okay. Well, now it's time to talk about one of my favorite things, complex female characters. This is bittersweet for me. I do love the fact that we are getting more complex female characters. What sucks is that whenever we do get one, the internet goes crazy and not in a good way. These people can scream from the top of mountains that they want more complex female characters, but the second they get one, the misogyny pops out. Their critical thinking skills get Thanos snapped. Suddenly, no one wants to have a nuanced conversation about this morally gray character and their motives. You also can't convince me that misogyny is not a part of the equation because people will make boring, one-dimensional, evil man seem like the most complex, misunderstood, sad puppy in the world, and then see a woman whose motives rose from a pool of grief and pain and then just call her a bitch. Which is fine, because I usually don't interact with those people. I usually, ignore those people, and that just means that there's more baddie for me. These women are precious, and I'll fight tooth and nail for them. I just love having a character where I can see them do something and be like, huh, okay. And then I go back and I be like, well, yeah, this explains this, and I understand that that can be perceived as bad, but when you take this into account, doesn't that make sense as to why they would do that? Again, I don't want these people interacting with us, but Caitlyn from Arcane is a great example. I don't want to hear anybody talk shit about Caitlyn. I understand that she did stuff. But once again, please make no comments about Caitlyn to us, because any of our listeners who have been there from the beginning also know that I'm a Catra defender, so whatever you say to me is not gonna get through my brain.
You can agree that character isn't the best while also still adoring them.
Yes, that is true, but also a lot of people don't agree with that.
Yes, I understand that. That's why I was saying it. Because a lot of people don't understand that. Yeah.
And they never will. And that's a choice they've made. Okay, what I also love is basically the death of the bury your gays trope. I mean, I don't think I have much to say about this. Less and less writers are killing their queers. And in some stories, the queers do die, but they don't stay dead. We're truly living in a golden age of the final girl gays. The Fear Street film trilogy is a great current example of this. The TLDR, those bitches lived. I do fear that the future may not be as generous as it has been. don't want to talk about current politics, but we may fall into a dark age of sorts. But we'll see. Another thing that I enjoy is novelization of shows and movies. This might be an obscure, unpopular opinion, but I do enjoy a novelization of like a show or movie. I think the thing I love the most is because it's a book, we have time. Unlike visual media, where you kind of have to, hook and maintain the viewer's attention, books are given this grace to have slow or long scenes. Not only that, but we also get more scenes usually. Scenes that would have been cut out because of time restraints or like budget limitations or something. Depending on the POV of the book, we get to see inside the minds of other characters. If it's third person, we get to read the thoughts of like multiple characters. When it's first person, we get to see how one specific person perceives everything that happens in the story, and it can be very interesting when they're explaining a scene that you've seen before, but the way that they explain it is different because they viewed it different. And in some cases, the novelization is just straight up the better version. Like a competent writer was given the reins of the story and they fixed it. Writers of novelizations are the true heroes, and we really need to appreciate them more. The last thing I have, you know what I love in media, Marco? Butches. Um,
Oh my god. I knew it was gonna be something funny, but I wasn't expecting that.
how is that funny? How is that funny, Marco? This is serious.
You like okay, I hate to be that guy, but like you like butches. Oh my god. I'm not
Literally blushing. I love butches. They are a really underrepresented group in general, and if media is going to have their token lesbian character, it's probably not going to be a butch. But they are getting slightly more representation, and I love it. You know, laying on my tummy, kicking my feet, and twirling my hair. I just love butches, and that's it. Hearts, kisses.
I love that for you. I really do.
Thank you. I will always show my love and support for butches. I am number one butch supporter and defender.
You're also butch bait, but that's it.
Thank
Uh,
you.
anyways, you guys, that's what we love and hate in media. If you want to follow us on social media, there'll be that in the description. And don't let your brains become soup. Goodbye.
We gotta work on that. Don't let your brains become soup.